Right.
Springboks back on the winning road on Saturday, but probably not the backlash that the BOK fans wanted. And now they selected pretty much the same team to go to New Zealand. Of course, the All Blacks also had a huge shock on Saturday night as the Pumas pummeled them. It was really one-sided victory, that one as well. With me, as always, Nick Mallett and Gavin Rich. Nick, let's start with you. What do you think of the BOKS win in wet conditions in Cape Town?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was sitting in a restaurant in Xingwezi with about 40 other diehard Springbok supporters. And it was interesting. Before the game, there was a real tension in the room. You know, the guys were very nervous. I think it gave all South Africans quite a shock, that performance the week before by the Australians in Emirates Airline Park. So there was a little bit of consternation, and the way we played, I mean, we played very sensible rugby under those conditions, and also to get us back into the winning mode, having a guy like Pollard there was pretty critical. And our chasing was good. Colby was outstanding. I thought we controlled the kicking game well. I thought Pollard didn't ever go away from the agreed game plan. But we didn't get the dominance with our pack that I expected. I thought we won one scrum penalty, but certainly we didn't put them under pressure, which we need to do in order to get those good exits or entries into their exits from our 22 or entries into their 22. And our carries were reasonably good, but they were in it. You know, that Australian side didn't go away. You know, and we got to a nice 20 points to 7. Suddenly, Fafi kicked it out on the full again, and we were thinking this is going to be like the weekend before. They got back into it, and in the second half, outscored us, if I'm not mistaken. I think they 10-8 or something like that. They played well, and had James O'Connor kicked better, it might have been a different result. So we're back on the winning road, but it wasn't a comprehensive or confident performance. It was quite a tight, nervy performance by the BOKS. And congratulations to Australia for making it as competitive as they did.
Yeah, I thought, Brendan, that what Nick was saying now about the people in Xingwezi being nervous. I think that the Springboks looked. It was a nervy performance. Looking back at it, and we maybe, Rassie afterwards spoke about the win will bring us confidence, and I do think that we lost a little bit of confidence after. And it's understandable when you're a team that's used to winning all the time, and you then concede 38 points on the bounce. It has to hit your confidence. So I just felt that we lacked. When you sort of talk about, it wasn't that sort of like emphatic bounce back. We didn't have that strut about us. We played like a team that maybe had lost a week, the week before, like they did. And when I arrived at the stadium, I came and myself and Mark Kahane walked in together, and we went into the press box, and the first person I encountered was Kobus Wiese, the commentator, and he told us about the injuries, the injury to Jean-Luc Deprez, and I had been quite bullish during the week that the Springboks would win emphatically. And then when I heard that Kwagga was going to number 8, although he played well, he's not a like-for-like replacement for Jean-Luc Deprez. And then Andre Esterhuizen, everybody, it sounds wonderful, and it's great for Rassie to be so innovative and have a centre who plays flank. But at the end of the day, that's still a work in progress. We can't sort of be convinced that really is the way forward. So I was really nervous about that, because we got a sort of odd loose trio, in a sense that there's only one player in that side who sort of played a specialist position on Saturday that he specialises in all the time, which is obviously Kwagga does play number 8 quite a lot. But, I can always consider Kwagga sort of a hybrid player who comes on rather than a specialist number 8 or number 6 or number 7 who starts the game. So we had Marco van Staden as the only specialist player. And then, of course, Frank Mostert is actually a lock who was playing. So I was really nervous about that game. And I have a feeling, I mean, not that this has been backed up by talking to anybody, but I have a feeling that maybe the BOKS themselves became a little bit sort of nervous when they lost Jean-Luc Deprez. And, I have to say, I mean, maybe it's something we can discuss later. It was a day when in the build-up to that game, when I was telling anybody who was prepared to listen that this might be the day where Rassie ignoring Evan Roos might actually come home to roost. This might be a day that it bites him, because when we sort of start going through to using Kwagga as the number 8 and we start bringing the centres onto the bench, then you do have to sort of start wondering, like, what is this issue with Roos? Because Roos, to me, is the like-for-like, would have been the like-for-like replacement for Jean-Luc Dupré. And we have to have changed our plans when we had Kwagga there and not Roos. So to me, that is one of the talking points after that game. And I see Roos isn't in the squad going overseas. Obviously, Visa's coming back, and we've got Sia coming back, who plays number 8. But I just do think that I know that Rassie feels he's got weaknesses to his game and variant. But I just on Saturday, the situation cried out for Evan Roos.
Nick,
yeah. Sorry, I didn't know whether you were going to ask a different question, but I can just on that note. I think Evan playing at home in front of Cape Town, in front of his home crowd, would have been a great thing. But he would have had to be brought in much earlier than just on the day of the game. Yeah. So that change was quite a much of shaken them, because it happened, just on the morning of the game. Apparently, he felt sick or had some stomach problems, Jean-Luc. What concerned me a little bit more was about this performance was, the very last move of the game, Brendan, when we got ourselves back into the game, and then we sort of were trying to let them back in the game with a penalty, and then Fati's yellow card from knocking. Thank God he did knock it down, because there was a 3-man overlap outside him. And if they'd scored there, it would have been another hairy finish. But then we did manage to get some really good play. And Ed Smith gets the ball with Creel completely open on his left and throws it along the ground, and Creel can't stop it with his foot. And that was a bonus point try that we could have finished off with a confident feel about it. But even that felt a little bit nervy, a little bit scrappy. And just throughout the game, our handling errors, just a couple of things just didn't go right. So I'm glad we did play that tight game. And thankfully, Pollard is an outstanding goal kicker and has got ice in his veins. There's no question about that. I think, had he been on the bench in the week before, and had Rassie had the opportunity to put Pollard on the field with, say, 35 minutes to go in that test match, I think we might have pulled that one out of the fire, because it just went from bad to worse in that second half in Joburg. Whereas he would have put a stop to that, and he would have got his pack playing forward. He would have put the ball downfield and up in the air, and I think that is the way to play against Australia.
I just want to clarify quickly that when I said that Evan Roos should have played, I wasn't saying that he should have been brought in from the cold to play. Obviously,
yeah.
I mean, then we might as well have used the guy that I saw on the touchline during the game, and I kept on thinking maybe he should go into the field, Dwayne Vermeulen. I mean, if we're going to bring in a guy, a guy completely from the cold, we might as well do that, because Josh Strauss, he's the assistant coach at the Bulls. They brought him in the Currie Cup game this week in an emergency. No, I wasn't saying that. I'm just saying that when there were injuries, I just feel that Roos has to have been in a 30-odd man squad, and that's what I'm saying. I just on my take on the game was, and I know we spoke about this after the game, Brendan, but we all talk about how great it is that the BOKS have so many options and so many selection options, and that Rassie can change the selection all the time. And I think a couple of the weeks ago we made the point that Rassie doesn't have an A team or a B team. But I felt watching that game on Saturday, when last did Andre actually start? He was next to Damien Delendi. When last did they play in a game? I know the guys talk about they train and they have really intense training sessions, and they try and replicate match situations, but that's still not a match. I mean, they haven't played enough games together, in my opinion. The rotation policy is correct, and I believe that Rassie's actually got a bit of a catch-22 coming up now, because his bankers did well for him on Saturday. His guys, the guys from the past, but we can't be convinced that those guys are all going to sort of still be around. To me, they look, watching that game, I mean, our reaction was slow. That first try that they scored, we reacted very slowly to that game. We sort of like, there's a little bit of sharpness or something missing. And so the same club as Visa I was talking about earlier, when I walked in there, and and he was a bit irritated with me because I said, well, thanks very much for that good news, when he told me that that Kwagga was playing at number 8 and that Esterhuizen was backing up. But I also bumped into Kobus on the way out, well, when I was heading to the press conference, and he asked me what I thought. And I said, when I watch this team, I sort of think they're either got too many players who are a little bit long in the tooth, meaning what I'm talking about, that reaction time and that sharpness, or otherwise they're a team that just doesn't play together often enough. And I said, I'm not sure which of the two it is. And that's really sort of my overriding impression, is that Rassie faces a bit of a catch-22 now, because he can't necessarily sort of say, well, we're going to go back to this team and then we're going to keep them until 2027, because we can't do that. So to me, it's like there's a bit of a dilemma coming up for him. And maybe this is, Nick will know all about, although your tenure, your World Cup, you never had a full year cycle. But, everybody always talk about, you have, I think it was always the third year that was supposed to be your disastrous year. And this, to me, is like Rassie's most testing year, given who we're playing against and given we're going overseas now at the end of the year to play in Dublin and to play in France. This is a very testing year. And it could sort of start going south very quickly if we're not careful. So to me, there's the here and now. There's the here and now that we've got to win now. But we've also still got to be building for the future. So he's going to have to manage the situation very carefully and very astutely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so I was going to just add to that, Gav, just about the game. I think part of it also, I think we were shocked by, obviously, Ellis Park. But I think one thing as well that was apparent to me was we didn't get what usually builds confidence for us is our set piece. And so we didn't get the set piece dominance in this game. We didn't get it from the scrum. Our lineouts have been shoddy the last 2 games. So everything that we didn't quite click. And then every time we went to the aerial play, Cheslin was amazing in the air as well, did very well. But there was a couple of times that we didn't get the aerial play, and they ran back at us very quickly, and we missed 3-4 tackles straight after the aerial play. And suddenly we were under pressure. That came from the one that the Aussies say that Fassi should have got the yellow card there, where he didn't release the guy on over there in front of his post. But that was the one thing. And I think that's part of the problem. Rassie said at the beginning of the season to us, no player is going to play more 8 to 9 games. And that was his plan. So his plan was to continue rotating. But now, suddenly if they'd lost, there was an interesting stat. If they'd lost by more than 16 points again on Saturday, they would be down to number 6 in the world. And the end of this year, I know we last time we went out with a terrible draw and we won the World Cup, but that's part of the thing for every team this year is just that World Cup draw. And you're right, the danger signs are there. I don't think we're quite in a crisis yet, but you got the feeling, and I said this to Gavin as well after listening to Rassie at the press conference, you got the feeling that there was almost just this relief afterwards, no matter the scoreline, that they just won. And that we're not used to seeing that from a Springbok team.
Well, I'm actually going to ask Nick this question. You talk about we didn't get the expected dominance that we got. Was that not down maybe to the selection and the way we did the bomb squad? Because with Kwagga then coming in for Jean-Luc du Preez, we had I hesitate to say light pack, because Thomas du Toit is still quite a beefy tight end, but we did have a lighter pack starting the game than we had coming in. And when you start with Loert, he's obviously a bit bigger than Ruan Noche, and then of course you've got Urban. We started, and I'm not saying that was the wrong move from Rassie, but it was almost like, if you watch the British and Irish Lions series against Australia, I felt that what nearly cost the Lions in that second test, I think it was in Melbourne, where eventually they won off the last move of the game. I thought that what cost the Lions in that game was that Farrell decided that I'm going to sort of have my Ellis Genges and the sort of the top forwards come on later in the match. And as a result of that, they were like 23-5 or something like that down at halftime, you'll remember. And I felt like when I watched on Saturday, it was almost like and the injury hadn't helped, but it was almost like we sort of and also I heard and the way he played sort of didn't make me think otherwise. I also heard from quite a reliable source before the game that Malcolm Marx was carrying a little bit of an injury into the game, but they just had to play him because we do have a potential problem in hooker. So, and I felt he looked a little bit sort of short of his usual full gallop. He did good things in the game, but to me, I was watching him specifically. He looked a little bit sort of, a little bit. I wouldn't say tired, but a little bit flat at times. I just think that in that first half, we probably did miss that. And maybe that's what I'm asking you, Nick. Is do you think that maybe the selection would sort of worked against us? I mean, the way we used the bomb squad this week, because we only put Walker on right at the end as well.
Yeah, I think that it was a reflection of how poor our bomb squad was the week before. So I think what we wanted was to get a decent group of players on the field who would make a positive impact for at least 25, 30 minutes. And he thought that Wilco, obviously is the strongest tight end we've got. He probably thought that Eben and Eben, I thought, played really well, and Loert, that they would give us much more punch. Obviously, he didn't expect Kwagga not to come off the bench, where he is very, very effective. So it was based, I think, on the lack of impact the week before that we went with this type of team. And then in the same way, he says time and time again, Rassie, there are three guys who own the number 3 jersey and to own the number 2 jersey. It's not one guy and then 2 replacements. It's these guys have to do the team proud. Now, if we go back and just think, last year we had a really good end of year tour. I think we won all 4 on that tour. And then we won 4 quite easy games coming into this. We lost 1 and now we've won 1. So if I'm not mistaken, we've won 9 out of 10 of the last 10 games. So a lot of reflection has gone. That was a very big shock, that game against Australia. And I think the team learned a hell of a lot from that. I think they realized that this is not the way we can play. We can't play fast and loose, side to side. Even if you think there's space, sometimes there isn't, and they can close that space down quickly. And if off a turnover, any team in the top 6 in the world is devastating. So you turn ball over against France or against Ireland, even against England, you're going to concede points. So going back to us being World Cup champions, we won by 1 point quarterfinal, 1 point semi-final, 1 point in the final. There's no way we are miles better than any team in the world. We just happen to have been very, very good for the last couple of years, and we've sneaked over the line ahead of other teams. And when we've lost, apart from this game against Australia, which is really a one-off in my view, because when we've lost before, it's been by a score or half a score, a last-minute drop goal by the Irish replacement fly-half, to beat us. It's these sort of things. So I'm not getting too panicked. I think New Zealand have got issues, to be outplayed as they were. I didn't see the game, but I've read in detail what happened in that game, and I've seen the stats, which are under 40 missed tackles in that game, and I don't know how many turnovers. So it's not as though New Zealand are comfortable, Australia are comfortable, or the Pumas are. We are, and you can chuck in Ireland and France and possibly England. And rugby's never been in a better position. Our 4 teams that are playing now, and those 3 I've just mentioned, can beat each other. And that's never been the case before. It's always been the case of the Southern Hemisphere very much dominating the Northern Hemisphere, in my view, for about 10 years. And now it's much more wide open. So let's see what happens. Gavin, I think a judgment must only be made possibly at the end of this Rugby Championship, because we know now that Argentina are going to be difficult wherever we play them. And 2 away games against New Zealand are very, very tough. I mean, if we get 1 win there, I think it'll be a really good result. And then the end of year tour, France and Ireland we play. So this year is going to be a really good test of where we are. And if we lose 3 or 4 of them, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think people learn from losses, like we learned against Australia. So I just hope that, the fact that we didn't have a proper fly-half on the bench, no one who could really cover as a good goal kicker, I think that's dangerous. It's dangerous going into any big match game without a guy who's a 80% goal kicker. And as I mentioned before, I think possibly had Pollard been on the bench, we might have maybe pulled that one out of the fire earlier than at the end where we were trying to score tries. Instead, we might have closed it down with a kicking game. So I'm sure that won't happen against New Zealand. I'm sure that we'll go in with a more strategic, more tactical way of playing against them. I think they are trying to play like us. Australia played like us. Let's not take away from what Australia's done. Australia was better in the forwards than I've ever seen them since John Eales and that pack of guys used to play. I mean, they scrummed well, they drove. I mean, they have those little pods of blind and open side and blind, and they just, Ikitar came in and smashed us, and then Valentini would smash us. And they were very, very physical against us. Let's not take nothing away. And when their backs got the ball in open space, they looked far more comfortable on the ball than we were. So we won that game because Pollard kicked really well. So, and we must accept that. You know, we've got our strengths, but if we don't play our team that it's at 100%, performing at 100%, we're going to lose to teams like New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, Ireland, and France. That's just the situation in world rugby at the moment.
I thought that the Aussies looked very composed, and you know, I did put up my hand and say that, you know, I underestimated them before the tour. In fact, before the Lion series as well. They obviously have made progress, but there's also an advantage that Australia had, and New Zealand to some extent, because although it was a French second string team that went to New Zealand, that second string French team was still very good, very competitive. So New Zealand, you know, so when I look back at now in retrospect, looking back at the first two games of the Rugby Championship, South Africa although South Africa started really well at Ellis Park, so you can't say that they were short of a gallop then, but over the 80 minutes there was rust. And having seen the Argentina game I can't remember which Argentina city the first test was, but having seen them there in comparison where they were in Buenos Aires, there was a huge improvement from the Argentine side, and they played, like, you know, a lot of second stringers in their series against England before that. So like us, they weren't playing all their top players, and they were also playing sort of weaker opposition. Well, you know, maybe England, but England were without their Lions, obviously, so it was weaker opposition anyway. They weren't playing. So, and we've been rotating selections. So Andre's game on Saturday, I think, was only the second time this season he's played at number 10. You know, and that maybe is what, you know, we need to take into account as well, is that I think the Boks will get incrementally better because they've now had two tough games. And the one thing about New Zealand that I really enjoyed from the South African perspective watching that game is that their weakness at the moment is exactly where it can't be against the Boks, and that's in the back three. I mean, they were awful in the aerial battle against Argentina, and we can expose that. So there are definitely weaknesses in the All Black. I mean, they've improved their forward play over the last couple of years. And in the past, I was always sort of like hopeful maybe that the Boks, when they play against the All Blacks, because they hadn't played in Super Rugby before like they used to in the past, they weren't quite as used to our physicality. But you know, I think that that probably won't be the case this year. But definitely when it comes to the back three. And you know, just talking about that, also the pace of the game, like, because we don't play Super Rugby, I've often felt that we take a while to get adjusted again to the Australasian sort of tempo and pace to the game. And so maybe there was an element too of that in these two tests against Australia, in which case it was the perfect dry run for going to New Zealand to play against the All Blacks.
There's another point. I agree. That is exactly correct. And I think I think Rusty in particular will be very comfortable going into this game at Eden Park, having come off two tough games against Australia. But a further point is that I think the refereeing has been incredibly fair. You know, normally you think the hometown gets a few of the hometown decisions, but not in our two games, and not in the games that Argentina have played against New Zealand. The refereeing seems to be far more consistent between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. Perhaps in that first test, the breakdown was a bit of a mess, and perhaps they allowed it, you know, Australia to slow down our ball a little bit too much. But generally, the way in which the teams have been refereed gives me confidence that when we go and play against New Zealand, we're not playing against the referee and New Zealand, which can happen. You know, it can certainly happen when we play away from home. And I think what Rusty has done over the last 2 years, since it's quite a while since he put that tape out, but he's certainly come to terms with the fact that you've got to be on the right side of the referee. And having Jaco Paper there, I think, has been a masterstroke, because he's highly respected amongst the international referees, and if he comes up with questions, they answer him immediately. So Rusty has removed himself from the direct confrontation with the referee, and I think Jaco Paper doing that has really been a big help for us.
Brendan?
So I was just I had my thing on mute. Just maybe looking ahead to that game in New Zealand. That's a common thing in Zoom apparently. But looking at that game in New Zealand now, I suppose the best thing for us was we spoken about last week as well. This loss that we obviously a bit more focused. But I just want to hear both of you, because in the same way, New Zealand probably it's the best thing for them as well. I saw yesterday on Twitter one of their radio show hosts going on about it's unforgivable that they lost to Argentina and all this stuff, and they've lost 4 times in a row to us. So there'll be a desperation from them at Eden Park to make sure that they put that right. So in a way, it worries me a little bit that the fact that it's maybe sharpened them, it will sharpen them up before that Eden Park game as well.
Yeah, I don't know if that was going to be the case. Sorry, I don't know if that was going to ever be the case. They're playing against the BOKS, and like us, they get up for the BOKS, and we get up for the All Blacks. Yeah, sorry, Nick. Sorry, I was just
No. Just I was going to say it's exactly the same as when they came over to play us here. It doesn't matter what state they're in, New Zealand. It makes no difference if they've lost to Ireland or lost to France. When they play against South Africa, they just somehow just get up for us, as do we for them. So 100% agree with you there, Gab, that there's no motivation. If we play badly, the big difference I would say between us and New Zealand is that in the past, if we've been played badly and been coached badly, we get beaten by 50 points against them. If they play badly, we beat them by about 5 to 10 points. We don't really put 30 or 40 points on against the All Blacks. It did happen once, I must admit. It happened when we played them in the game prior to the World Cup, where we did that 7-1 box split, and we didn't kick for poles the whole game from penalties. We just kicked for the corner, and the BOKS played an absolutely magical game that at Twickenham against the All Blacks. So that was the one case that I can remember where we've taken them to the cleaners. But unfortunately, in the past, when they get their heads up and they get on top of us, they have the ability to run in tries more easily than we do.
The one game that we should have put them away properly, but didn't, was actually in Nelspruit in 2022. We were so dominant in that game. I think we eventually won 29-10. It was a big win, and it was a big wake-up call for New Zealand. But that was a game. So I always sort of feel that it won't happen in New Zealand. I can't see it happening in New Zealand. That would be almost like Australia winning at Ellis Park like they did. Yeah. But, I mean, I do sort of see at some stage, I see the BOKS maybe doing what they did at Twickenham and maybe putting the All Blacks away at some point. If we develop our game and we continue, if bringing sort of more balance to the sort of Tony Brown approach and becoming more of a sort of complete all-round team. I think I'm very optimistic. I mean, whilst I agree with you, Nick, about there not being much between the teams at the moment, I do think that the Springboks to some extent are going through growing pains. We've been going through growing pains for a while, but I do think that South African rugby can get much better. I mean, I'm talking about players that can come in the future that aren't quite there yet. In the short term, I think that there isn't much to prove, but I think in 2027, and I'm assuming somebody like Sasha by then could be, really, really, really good. By 2027, we might be ready to be ahead of the pack, but at the moment we're close together. So yeah. I can't remember. I was going to make another point onto that, but it slipped my mind now.
Yeah, no, just about getting smacked. You can't playing the style of rugby which we do, which is subdue and penetrate. Is you usually just stay 3, 6, 9 points ahead of the other team and a couple of more tries. But the All Blacks, if you start playing too much rugby, which we did against Australia in the second half. They have the ability to do those long-range transition tries against you that can put the score, into the stratosphere. And we've got to try. That's not good news. The one thing is, I haven't seen a better 20 minutes from the BOKS in the first 20 minutes. So whatever we say about that game, the last 30 wasn't good, but cheapers, we were absolutely untouchable in those first 20 minutes. I mean, everything we did. I didn't think Australia got their hands on the ball. We kicked it up in the air and we caught it ourselves. You know, we just did everything right until we had the one kick out on the full from Fasti. That was the first error I even remember in that game. So when you talk about our ability to do it, we have got the ability, providing we understand that you have to get momentum downfield before you can take on a backline attack. There are very, very few backlines who can score from first phase without getting the momentum or from a transition. Normally at a turnover, you can score tries because the defense is all over the place. But in terms of attack, you need to get momentum downfield so that some of the players, their defenders are running backwards and you've got 15 players running forwards. Then you can score tries.
Well, Joe Schmidt did say almost exactly what you've just said after the game on Saturday. I was at the press conference, and he was asked, like, you know, was there an improvement in the Springbok performance today compared to Johannesburg? And I felt that he fudged it. He didn't sort of come quite straight out and say that there was no improvement, but he said that first 20 minutes was the best window he's ever seen from a Springbok team. And he was going on about how they didn't let us breathe and just how good they could be. And it was almost like he was saying that because of that first 20 minutes, it was almost a better performance in Joburg, even though they lost. That he sort of recognized. He recognized, and the Australian players too, I think. You know, we never really had this like sort of braggish sort of attitude of Australia after winning this series. It was almost like that first 20 minutes has sort of stayed in their minds too. They know, they must know. I mean, as Joe said, that, you know, they didn't let us breathe. They must know how the potential of the Springboks if they continue on that road, which, you know, and we're retaining, because they lost their balance after that. They stopped kicking and they started running everything. If they had retained that approach in Joburg, I mean, Australia could have been given a huge hiding, and we'd be having a completely different conversation now.
Yeah. So just going forward, looking ahead, you know, the safety net is Pollard and the territorial game and the scrumming and the lineouts and the driving maul and the incredibly physical defense. That's our safety net. We're very good at that. But to suffocate teams and put them under the pressure that we did in the first 20 minutes, you have to know when to play with the backs and when to give it to your forwards to get the momentum. And I think that's something we're still battling with. You know, we either go from one way of playing, which is the Mani Lubbock and perhaps Feinberg and Ngoma Zulu, which is let's have a crack at everything, or else we have the Pollard game, which is let's kick everything and occasionally pass the ball. So it's a blend of those two that I think we're looking for, and only experience is going to give it to us.
I was going to ask just the one from me, because we're going to start running out of time soon. But just the last one, Gav, when we were talking about, Nick, we were talking about the selections and stuff. I sort of wondered as well. I said to Gav yesterday, one of the things we've been almost spoiled with over the last year is that when we've had an injury, we've had a Gerard Steenekamp, for instance, come in, or Ben Jason Dixon, those type of players who've almost slotted in seamlessly and performed straight away. This year, we've got a Bone Fenter who plays his first test and takes a little bit of speed, and that's natural for some players to do that, to take a little bit of speed. And maybe those injuries, I'm thinking of the Elrich Lowe's, Cameron Honeycomb hasn't really played, but Gerard Steenekamp in particular, you know, those type of injuries that have hit us, and Ben Jason Dixon, they've hit us a bit more than we've expected this year as well. Just your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, Gav, you go.
Well, you know, we spoke about it when we spoke about the loose head props, for instance, where again I will go back onto the tangent I went onto earlier, where I'm talking about long term and short term. There's some very good loose heads, for instance, coming through in South Africa. You know, from everybody I speak to who's played against him, say that Vernon, I think it's Vernon Matongo, who's only just played a few games for the Stormers, but guys who have played against him sort of talk about him becoming a real great. There's so the young guys coming through, but in the short term, whilst we have those injuries, I think we do have. We're not as strong there as we were. I mean, when we had Frans Malherbe, and then we had the Wilco Low and Vincent Koch has sort of faded a bit. He's not quite as good a player as he was, or that's the appearance I get when I watch the Sharks anyway. Has he actually played? I don't even know if he's played for the Boks that much this season. So I'm not sure if he'd be different in the green and gold jersey rather than the black and white. But that's it. You know, looking long term, I think that there's a lot of talent coming through. I don't think we're ever going to have a problem in most positions going forward. But short term, in this year where we have to sort of keep our heads against above water, where we could potentially lose, like as Nick said, 4 or 5 games, it is a bit of a concern.
Yeah.
Just before
Brendan, on that note,
stop here quickly because we've got about a minute and it's going to cut you off. So can we log in quickly again, just and then we'll finish off? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% right about those injuries we've had. You know, I mean, loose forward. You know, we've got so many. A guy like Honeycomb was really putting his name forward as one of the star players in URC, and I'm sure he would have got a go. Eric Lowe is outstanding. We've had the yellow card to Visa. I mean, we've still got an Evan Roos in the background who isn't being used. So, but you're right. We are getting down to to players like Bowen Fenter, who perhaps was quite surprised when he got the call up. I mean, we were sitting in a situation with a number of loose head props and tight head props in this country. So we need to build that back, and also the injuries are going to be part and parcel of playing all year round, which we're doing at the moment. Remember, that is also a real problem that we have. You know, our South African players play the whole year round. I mean, we have to rest the Springboks after the Springbok Championships, but we're playing against Argentina, and I think the URC starts on the same weekend virtually, and the Currie Cup is being played at the same time as all this. So our poor guys never ever get a break. It's really tough. And for the World Cup in 2027, we're going to have to take very good decisions about giving players time off and getting them fit. If I can just finish with one thing, and I think we've been quite soft on the Springboks on that game. I don't think Fassi had a great game. And I don't think also that Kane Moody had his best game on Saturday. The two of them, I think, had they played better, we would have been more comfortable. But they were both under a bit of pressure in that game. I mean, I think sometimes the first try, I wasn't sure what our positioning was when Nick White put the little grubber through. Why was there not a fullback in? You know, he might have been in possession out wide. But the moment they get the penalty, your fullback's got to get behind the set piece as quickly as possible to stop that little grubber through. And we didn't do it. And then Kane Moody, you know, he missed the tackle last weekend. He had a couple of difficulties under the high ball this weekend. First, he gave the yellow card away. You know, it's just they just need to sharpen up. Those players. Backline players, unfortunately, get shown up when you make errors, but the mark of a really good backline player is an error-free game. It's not about how many brilliant moves you do. It's being like Colby. How many mistakes do you see Colby make? Just so few. How many mistakes do you see Delander make? Very few. Pollard, very few. So that's what they should be trying to aim at.
I just think that's where you know, I was talking about earlier about Rusty's catch-22 in the sense that, I mean, you mentioned Delenda. He actually did make one. I remember thinking in particular he knocked the ball on. Yeah, he did that knock on, and I just that's where I just sort of feel there is part of me that sort of thinks, well, you know, if Fassi was playing more regularly, I mean, if there was a string of games rather than one game every couple of weeks. I mean, you know, you start a test match and your last game was 6 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago. It's very different to like the Aussies. Most of the Aussies, okay, they've got injury problems now. But before they had injury problems, I mean, they had the core of the same team, like right through the Lion series and through to now. You know, those guys, they played 2 weeks ago or they played a week ago. Our guys like get out and they think, okay, well, it's 5 weeks since I last played, and they might also then be thinking I'm playing for my place and everything. It's like it is a different situation where you've got that settled team and everybody's got that sort of intrinsic sort of understanding of each other's game, and you just naturally gel because you part of a machine. And at the moment, it's not a machine; it's like a whole lot of component parts that are set aside, and then you suddenly bring them together for the game. And maybe that's one of the reasons we stutter a bit.
Grant Williams has been good though, hasn't he? I've really thought he's played well. I haven't seen him make many mistakes, and you know, he's quick around the field. His box kicking has been outstanding. His passing is great, and it's just tight. He hasn't had those gaps that you get perhaps in a Currie Cup or a URC game. In Test match rugby, things close up so much quicker. But he has got that pace to exploit. if anyone is just half a yard too slow. So in New Zealand, it'd be nice to see if he can keep his place there and be the number one in that position.
The second last thing I want to ask all of us about is obviously Argentina, Australia now becomes the other thing, and it's wide open now. Both sides can win the Rugby Championship. How do you see those games going? Because last year Argentina, I think if I remember right, Gavin, gave Australia, I think, a 60-pointer there in Argentina. Yeah. So there's a bit of a revenge factor, and obviously the Wallabies are a lot better this time around.
Yeah, they are, but I actually think that, and Joe Schmidt hit the nail on the head at the post-match press conference, that the attrition rate is starting to maybe going to start catching up with Australia. They've lost a lot of players now. I mean, they lost Tom Wright in that game. They lost Nick White. Tom Wright, Nick White. So Ali came off before half-time. It all depends on, because now we're in that sort of weird situation we often are in the Rugby Championship, where we were supporting our team against Australia before. Now we want them to go to New Zealand and beat New Zealand. So they've got two tough games against Argentina. And I think a lot of South Africans will be hoping that, before this game, the perception, sorry, not before this game, before the Argentina game later on Saturday night, before they beat the All Blacks, Rassie was saying we need to go to New Zealand and win two games. Now you can go there if you want to. If your aim is to win the Rugby Championship, you can now go there and win one game and rely on Australia knocking them over or something. And then the one thing that helps South Africa a little bit in their games against Argentina is that in a way we have two home games. And I'll tell you why I say that is that we're not going to Argentina this time. We're playing at Twickenham, which is almost like a second home because of the expatriate community over there. We don't always do that well against England there, but we tend to do well in neutral games at Ellis Park. So there's going to be a lot of people hoping that Australia knock over New Zealand, and I think that could happen certainly in the game in Australian soil. But they don't. It's a fact that they don't have the same kind of depth as South Africa have and New Zealand have. And if South Africa are having problems at the moment because of injuries, imagine how it could impact on Australia. So that would be my answer to your question, Brendan. That a lot is going to depend on how Australia man up. When I say that, I mean how many injuries they've got. Obviously, they've got the beating of Argentina, but Argentina have also got the beating of Australia too. So it's going to be two very good games.
I was going to just say before, Will Skelton was ruled out of the rest of the Rugby Championship this morning, so that's a huge blow for them as well.
Wow, that is. No, it really is. He's a proper unit and gives them that ballast in the pack. From a scrummaging point of view, behind the tight head prop, he's enormous, and he's stopping mauls and his ability to create maul movement, dynamic in the mauls is second to none. He's very, very good. So that's going to be a huge loss. I think, just as looking forward, these next 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks are going to be really interesting. I think it could be 1-1 to both teams. I'm hoping we get a win in New Zealand. So New Zealand get a win, we get a win. And I think the same in Australia. I think Argentina can get a win there and maybe Australia one. So we might be looking at, everything to play for in the last 2 games with us having 2 against Argentina. So it's not all lost by any means, and it really is tight. I don't think you can go in saying anyone is a favorite for any of these games. And when it's like that, you can get a turnaround like we had with Argentina beating New Zealand. That was a really, really good performance by Argentina. And if they come up against an Australian side that's a little bit weakened, they could win one of those games. So it's not out of the question that we go into the final 2 games having to beat Argentina twice in order to win the championship.
Yeah, the final thing I want us to just talk about is something away from the Springboks quickly. I found it quite interesting this weekend. Gavin mentioned it a bit earlier. Josh Strauss not having played for 4 years and coming back on the bench for the Bulls in the Currie Cup. I told Gav a stat as well that 46 of the 56 Bulls contracted players were unavailable this past weekend, either through Springbok, URC pre-season or injuries. And so they literally had to go to club players. The Sharks, we know, are playing basically almost an under-21 side. Same with probably Western Province with a couple of Springbok Sevens players. And that there is a chance that the Lions came short as well, even though they're playing basically a URC mixed squad that they're playing there as well. we need a rethink for the Currie Cup. That's my point. I mean, we want the bigger franchises to be there. It's great for the smaller franchises, and it's wonderful for Boelan to see them, your old team, to see them doing so well. And they could easily win the Currie Cup this year the way they're going. Just guys' thoughts on the Currie Cup and just how it's been this year, and do we need a rethink, or is this maybe where we headed, that the smaller unions are going to probably dominate for the rest of the competition?
Well, I've told you before, Brendan, that back in the day when Nick was the Springbok coach, we had a development competition because everybody tells me it's the sponsors driving the Currie Cup being played in this window, and my biggest problem with the Currie Cup is actually that it's played in what should be the South African off season. And if we played the Currie Cup at a different time of year, in between the URC games, then the rank and file players or the fringe players, let's call them, in the URC squads would then probably play Currie Cup, and a lot of them need game time during the year. I mean, somebody like Jonathan Roach, for instance, got a game or two for the Stormers in, I think, December, and then when I can't remember who came back from injury, then suddenly he wasn't playing again. You could have a situation then where the Western Province team, who I think should become the Stormers 15 in the Currie Cup if it carries on like this. If the Western Province team would be a lot stronger and they would be a lot more competitive because they'd have those guys coming in. And going back to what I was saying, in next day, we had the sponsors actually as the name of the competition. It was called the Vodacom Cup. And the way this competition is at the moment, it should be called the Carling Cup, because it's actually to me, it's a bit of an insult to the players who played in the Currie Cup in the past that it is like that. I love watching the country union teams, and I've said it before. I mean, if I have a choice of a game to cover, I'd rather see the Boelan play against the Cavaliers, or Griquas play against whoever, the Cheetahs, or I'd rather see that kind of game, because those guys are the frontliners in their province, and it's a game worth watching. The other games that we watch, when Western Province play against the Blue Bulls and the Sharks play against the Lions, we're actually playing what we used to call in the old days a curtain raiser. It used to be a curtain raiser to the main game, and you don't want the Currie Cup to become that. So that's it. I think if the Currie Cup's going to continue as the Currie Cup, it should at least be played in a different window where because John Dobson and John Plumtree and Johan Ackerman are all quite right in withdrawing. I exclude the Lions because to me they play too many URC players in their Currie Cup side. But those guys are all completely right. They put out sides that, I mean, every week when there's a team announced, there's players I've never heard of before because they're bringing in club players and everything, and they're desperate and they're playing their assistant coach in the game. I mean, that really sort of sums it up. So to me, it's like move the window back into the URC season, or otherwise change the name of the competition.
Yep, I'm into that.
Okay. I think on that note, let's close it off. Thanks, guys, for chatting. It's always great. Nick, enjoy your holiday there. I hope you see a lot more of the Big Five over there and some great sights.
Thanks.
And we'll chat again after the All Black game, which is going to be quite
looking forward to that.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.